Deputy War. I'll let him introduce himself in a moment, but he's been co-opted because a lot of the issues that we're looking at span both our panel and his panel, which deals with infrastructure. So you will know him in a different capacity, Minister. For our purposes today, you're very much here in your capacity as Minister for Sport, which is an area that we scrutinise as a panel. So I'm Deputy Montfort Taddy, I chair the panel.
I'm Deputy Max Andrews, I'm a panel member.
And I'm Deputy David Warren, as a panel member at the moment, co-opted.
So, Connétable Andy Jehan, Assistant Minister for Economy with responsibility for sport and also Minister for Infrastructure.
If you just introduce your team, please.
Dave.
So I'm David Kennedy, the Chief Executive Officer of Jersey Sport.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. I'm Heath Harvey, Head of Local Economy within the Department of Economy, where sports policy sits. Morning, Chair. Barclay Harvey, Head of Sport for the Government of Jersey. I run the government's sports facilities.
Thank you. Welcome. So we've got a lot of questions for you. There's seems to be a lot of public interest in some of the questions that we may be asking today. But Minister, we wanted to give you an opportunity early on in the hearing to maybe set out your vision for sport in the island, which might include also challenges, opportunities for the sporting community, and also how that affects you as Minister.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, and thanks for the opportunity. I think it's great to see so many people outside who show an interest. And if it was on a weekend, we'd see far many more people. And if the weather was nicer, we'd have seen far many more. But it's great to see the interest in sport locally, and we're blessed in Jersey with sport. That doesn't mean to say we can't do more and we couldn't do better, but I think we do very well in terms of most sports. We've got challenges, there's no doubt about that, and with my other hat on infrastructure, we've got challenges right across when it comes to infrastructure, whether that's roads, drains, or sports facilities. We have got some amazing facilities on this 9x5 island serving 100,000 people. But we need to continue to improve. But what we've also got to do is to maintain what we've got, because in some cases we've been very bad at that. And last year we saw a lot of challenges at the Connétable, for example. So the Connétable is coming towards the end of its workable life. So we're looking at plans, what we can do there.
When you say Le Connétable, which part do you mean? The sports centre?
Yeah. So it's a fantastic facility. But we can't have interruptions like we've seen in the last 12, 18 months. So we are working on plans there. We've also got swimming pools that have got to be maintained, and unfortunately our swimming pools are all of a similar age, so that becomes a problem when you've got to repair and update swimming pools at a similar time. There are opportunities both within the public estate, but also I'm encouraged by the amount of people I talk to seriously about investing in sports. But what they want is some kind of surety. They don't want to be putting a planning application in for a sports facility when there's no indication of whether they're going to get that passed or not. And we saw that in the Island Plan debate. There was a cricket centre proposed at St Martin's. It was supported by the independent panel that reviewed that site, but unfortunately it didn't get enough support in the States. No.
How do you get around that issue? Because you're not suggesting that sports clubs should be able to short-circuit a planning process.
Not short-circuit a planning process at all, but I'm looking at how could we help financially. If a sports club puts in an application, they pay a lot of money in terms of fees. And I've worked personally with one organisation who spent tens of thousands of pounds. They've had support from a planning officer, they had support from the Architects Jersey Commission. The planning officer changed and said that they wouldn't support the application. So the investor just walked away, and that was a significant investment in a sports facility which is much needed on the island. So I'm looking at how we could support organisations, individuals who are wanting to invest in sport by could we do something with the fees, the planning fees, because if they don't get approval, they haven't spent all that money on planning fees to get knocked back. And I think if we can encourage private investment, and there are significant sports looking to invest private money, but they want surety. What we've got is land on the island, and the government owns land, which we could utilise better perhaps. with a partnership approach. And so those are the kind of areas we're working on.
Is it a question of zoning though? Is zoning also an issue in terms
Not
of...
always, not always, but in some cases it has been. So the cricket was a zoning issue, and it was very disappointing that colleagues in the Assembly didn't support that.
Can I bring you back? So I think you've touched on it, but could I bring you back to the question of vision? Do you have a vision as effectively Minister for Sports in the island as to where you'd like to get to?
Well, I think we're making reasonable progress in sport, and I think I was pleased to read the submission by the Sports Council recognising the progress made by Jersey Sport in the last 12, 18 months. In terms of facilities, we are working hard behind the scenes looking at upgrading facilities that we currently in our ownership, and that's where our focus is currently. We want to provide facilities and also open up the school estate. And I heard one lady saying that a single court wasn't sufficient. Government of Jersey's probably got 13 indoor netball courts, and we've got Oakfield just coming online, and netball were involved in the concept design of that, and have been involved as recently as about 3 weeks ago with the design of Oakfield, because they've changed some of their requirements. So we can hold training on 3 courts, but we need to utilise the school estate in a much better way than we currently do.
Can I just say about that? I mean, this lady made the comment you made there was she was talking about the standalone courts. One of the problems with all the education facilities, as quoted to me outside there, is they're very fragmented. So you can't actually have groups of people together. So you can't. So if they were talking about 50 or 60 youngsters coming out to train, you can't exactly put them across 5 different school estates, can you?
No, you can't, Dave, but what you can do is play school matches. So if School A is playing School B, they could play at one of the schools.
I'm talking about training and building the netball community and building from there.
Well, I think if you look around the country, the UK, you'll find very few 4-court sites for netball. You'll find one in Bath. I think you'll find one in Nottingham.
But this is Jersey, we're not talking about Bath.
No, this is what I'm saying. So to ask for a 4-court solution isn't necessarily, we're not necessarily going to achieve that. We've got a 3-court solution at Oakfield, and we're looking to utilise that as much as possible for netball. We've also got to help other sports, cricket and basketball, to mention a couple. So, but some of these games, we're busing young people from La Rocquiere, for example, to Les Ormes, and then bringing them back, where we could be utilising a court at La Rocquiere to play against another school. So I think it's about scheduling, and we're meeting with netball next week sometime. Again, actually, we've had a number of meetings with netball, and we'll continue to liaise with them to try and accommodate their schedule. Yeah.
Minister, and I think we will come back to some of the issues about the specific sports and maybe challenges that they're facing later on in our questioning. Minister, a review of sports and physical activity was undertaken in 2023. Can you tell us what progress has been made since that review?
I can. Significant progress, actually. And the Simon Cooper review was a very welcome addition to our sport. And of the 21 recommendations made, 14 recommendations have been completed. 2 of the recommendations were rejected, both by my predecessor and myself, and 5 recommendations are ongoing. And recommendation 7, which is about distributing lottery funding, I'll be bringing a proposition to the Assembly. And recommendation 16 is with SIPES in terms of strengthening up the local PE provision.
Are there any other recommendations that are outstanding? Could you just say what the other ones are? You mentioned 5. I think you've spoken to 2 of them. Is that right?
Yeah. I'm just. I don't have the detail of the. I can write to you with the with the 3 that are outstanding.
That would be welcome.
But we are. I think that report was a very welcome report, and I'd be keen to welcome Simon back in early next year to review it, see the progress that has been made.
So one of the recommendations, I think recommendation 6, is the Government of Jersey should secure additional funding for sport and physical activity. How do you interpret that, and have you accepted that recommendation?
Absolutely. So we are working, we've got a workshop next Wednesday actually with the Council of Ministers looking at the government plan for next year. And I will be making a bid for additional funding so that we can ensure that our facilities in particular are up to speed and up to date and well maintained, as well as looking at capital investment in replacement or new facilities.
Can I just, on that note, I see in the commentary here, so we give Jersey Sport just over 2.14 million, and infrastructure has cost around 4.6 million. I mean, where do these numbers come from? How do you identify what the level of demand is and what what is the real need as opposed to what you can get?
Well, I think it's like everything in government. If we were given more, we could do more. But I think we've got to be realistic. As I said earlier, I've also got responsibility for things like roads and drains, and we need money for those things. Health is a priority. Education is a priority.
But health benefits from sport being better funded.
Absolutely, and we recognise that.
Yeah.
And I'm working with both the health minister and the education minister. We've got a group. The three of us meet with officers on a regular basis, and we continue to try and make improvements. We absolutely recognise the benefits of sport for young and old alike in terms of public health benefits.
I'm still, capacity-wise, to get that number of 2.14, is that actually a fair allocation of funding to sport? Does that keep sport upright?
Well, I
or
think,
should it be nearer double that? Or I don't know.
I think if you
I don't
look
know how
at
you identify a number.
Well, I think if you look at what we spend in sport on the island, if you included depreciation on buildings, the amount of money we spend on sport is very significant. The amount of money we spend on sport, I would say, is greater than a lot of jurisdictions of similar size. That doesn't mean to say we don't want more. Of course, we'd like to do more. The man on my right would be able to spend twice as much, I'm sure, if I gave him twice as much. We've seen a significant increase in travel grants following Deputy Kovac's proposal, which we warmly embraced, and that has been well received by sports.
Does it include, sorry to interrupt, but does it include when we're having comparators about additional funding that the UK, for example, can get through lottery funding? If you take about the global amount of funding that sports get elsewhere, not just government.
I don't think we have details on how much is invested in sport locally, because we're very grateful to all of those individuals and organisations who sponsor and support clubs, individuals, programmes, and we don't actually have a value to that currently, I don't believe. So it's significant investment in sport from private individuals and organisations.
What I'm saying, I mean, that presumably is good, but that happens everywhere. So if we were looking to the UK as a comparator, the UK obviously you get local funding, government funding, but there'll be a big access to national lottery, which Jersey doesn't have. So in terms of the funding formula in Jersey, what are the levers that you think we have in terms of if we want to increase funding? Is it either government or private sector?
Well, I think we can work harder with private sector. That doesn't mean to say the government can't do more, but I do think the government does a lot in terms of sport provision on the island, but also there are people who are willing to invest in sport, as I mentioned at the outset of this discussion, and people who are willing to invest more in sport if they had surety of a facility, and the facility would be used for the sport of their choice.
Can I ask a question about data? What data do you collect? Because you've obviously said we don't really know what the numbers are because some of its contributions are free. There's a lot of different ways in which sport is provided. Do you collect any data on that? Is there a database about saying, this would be the overall cost? If we had to pay for it all ourselves.
So we've
absolutely. You understand what I'm saying?
Good question. Yeah. So I've been asking for the last 12 months or longer to get figures in terms of not only what we spend but what we receive and what it costs us to run sports. We've got sporting facilities. For example, the gymnastics in the Rotunda at Fort Regent pay less than £16 an hour to rent that space. That's not fair on other sports who are paying 3 times as much as that fee. And so what I'm trying to do, and I've done this when we've renewed leases on clubhouses, we've got a single rate which we use as a multiplier. So at least it's fair and consistent. We've got some legacy agreements with organisations, and we need to find a way of getting out of those legacy agreements. So in terms of what do we do to fund sport, well, I can assure you it costs more than £16 an hour to run the rotunda.
And the language you're using here is you're using cost. I mean, I would have thought it's actually investing in sport is the better turn of phrase. So I just wonder how it becomes an economic model as opposed to an investment in sport. Because at the end of the day, it may cost £13, whatever an hour, whatever your figure is. But actually, what is that benefiting in terms of the bigger health picture, in terms of keeping those people fit and active and healthy? So you're obviously making a massive saving by keeping lots of people healthy. So I don't believe you can focus on a number and say it's costing this much. We've got to say is how much are we investing? Surely that's the question.
I didn't tell you what it was costing. I was telling you how much we were receiving. For
Okay,
that,
receiving.
For that space.
Okay, well, yeah, but it's
so
yeah.
what I've asked for
Okay.
is exactly that work
Yeah.
you've suggested. Is what is it? What is the investment that the island is making? So if we're receiving a third back or a half back or whatever that is, we can then identify that. But it's taken far longer than I would have hoped to get those numbers. But the team within sport are working on that for us. It's really important that we understand that, and also working with colleagues in public health that we understand the benefits. So a number of the programs that we do that help people keep out of hospital, there's fantastic benefit to that.
Absolutely.
And so we work hard to try and find the numbers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just staying on that same report about the review of sport and physical activity, recommendation 8 talked about recommended having coordination across government, that it should be strengthened by the involvement of ministers and officials in the new sports and physical activity network group. Can you tell us about that group? Does it already exist, and have you accepted that recommendation?
Absolutely, and that was the group I was mentioning earlier, where the health minister and the education minister and myself meet on a quarterly basis with officers, and the officers meet without us at times. So that work is underway, and that is some of the work we're doing in terms of making cases for capital investment is a result of that team working together.
Okay, thank you. And is that the group that was established in June 2024? Is that the same group that we're talking about?
Yes, about it, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
And finally, for my part, and then I'll hand over to Deputy Andrews, can you explain what the government oversight of sports in Jersey consists of?
Well, there's a number of things. Clearly, we work closely with Jersey Sport. We have provision within schools, and then we also do things like anti-doping, etc. So we have a whole range of responsibilities for sport, and yeah, we work right across the piece with different partners, and that is why the three ministers working together is a useful forum.
When you say anti-doping, is that to do with education around anti-doping, or is that testing?
Well, it's predominantly it is around education,
Yeah.
and you know we recently had a visit from an international panel whose name escaped me, and they UNESCO, thank you, UNESCO, and they gave us a favourable report. So, for example, we're going to have athletes in a month's time going to the Island Games. They all have to be aware of the responsibilities they have as an athlete, but we've got many athletes performing on a national and international stage who equally have to be aware of their responsibilities. So it's an ongoing programme. I was recently at an event at Highlands for elite sports people, and one of the centres there was around anti-doping.
Thank you, Mike.
Yep. Thank you very much, Chair. Minister, I just wanted to ask you a question regarding whether you are of the opinion that there is a sufficient level of infrastructure for sport in the island, and if not, which areas are most affected?
Well, I think if you look at the provision of sport on the island, I think we have got fantastic facilities, and we should recognise that. We should be very proud of what we've got. I think one of the challenges is access to those facilities, government facilities, because we do have a number of halls that lie empty night after night, week after week, and aren't utilised. And for example, we're playing picket ball on a five-a-side court when picket ball could be played in a primary school hall.
Yeah.
And, you know, we could get out into the parishes more where people could just travel a short distance to do that. We've also got fantastic private provision. You know, we've got some fantastic facilities. I was involved in one of those for many years, and I know the effort that people make to keep these things running. You know, in my parish, we've got motocross, we've got go-karting.
Yep.
You know, so for an island 9x5 to be able to provide those sports, because they're not very friendly to neighbours, but I'm very proud that my parish support both of those sports, and the clubs themselves work hard with us to minimise disruption and help our community.
And do you feel, following the discussions you've had with sports clubs and organisations, that those sports clubs and organisations feel that they are sufficiently funded in the island?
Well, you know, it's the old problem. I think what we desperately need is some more 3G pitches, all-weather pitches, and again, access to the 3G pitches we've got at schools in a more coordinated way. But I'm actively talking to a number of football clubs who are interested in doing something themselves. We're also working with the Jersey Football Association and the Football Foundation, who have provided funding to a number of clubs on the island in the past. And but the more all-weather facilities we can get, the better, because we can get better usage. And we're really keen in the government plan to have a plan for La Rocquiere to have a 3G pitch with separate entrance, separate changing rooms, so it can be used throughout the week, throughout the holidays, with the school having priority in the school day.
Yeah, thank you very much, Minister. Sorry.
Just in terms of capacity there, you talked about 3G pitches and sort of acknowledging that there's a massive demand for that. How do you acknowledge these demands? Because obviously if you know 3G, is this people banging on your door with emails and telling you we haven't got facilities? Because what I'm concerned about is the
3G
smaller
pitches.
sports. Sorry, just to finish off. The smaller sports, obviously you don't have quite the level of voice, and we've heard this from some of the Port Region groups, seem to be put on the back burner, whereas the louder voices seem to get, or the resource is attempted to be found for the louder voices. So how do we how do we hear those voices in an even way so that we make sure the relevant investment is made in each of those sports?
Well, there's a huge amount of minority sports played in Jersey and played to a good level. You know, we're really keen to help the climbing club, for example.
But how do you identify that demand?
Well, we've liaised with the climbing, local climbing.
So how do they communicate with you, though?
Well, they contacted us and asked us about that.
Okay.
But in terms of football, there's been a number of reviews. In a previous life, I was part of a Jersey Football Association grounds and facilities committee, and I've continued to work with the JFA, as I mentioned, and the Football Foundation. And the Football Foundation are experts in this. And what they've identified is how many teams currently play football in Jersey, how many people are involved, and therefore what the typical demand would be. So I'm sure every club would like a 3G pitch, or most clubs would like a 3G pitch. The reality is that we probably need another 3G pitches on the island.
But for me, that's still not identifying the demand. I mean, there doesn't seem to be a clear framework about how you identify demand for sport in general on this island.
In respect of the football, there's been a huge amount of work done.
Football's
in
one
terms of
sport,
demand.
though.
And I think
Noisy sport.
I don't know if it is.
I mean, noisy in terms of their ability to generate interest. I'm just curious to know, shouldn't there be a framework that says we identify the demand of sport in this island, regardless of whether you're a one-man band or whether you're got 1,000 footballers playing every week?
I think it'd be great to do a gap analysis to see what is missing, but
one isn't currently done. That's my point, really.
No, we haven't done a gap analysis necessarily, but we've got. I think the government has something like 48 outdoor netball courts.
Okay.
And
I'm not worrying about netball particularly. This is just
I just want to explain because they've got 11. We've got 11 indoor netball courts, or will have when Oakfield is finished. So we've got significant availability for sport. Gymnastics is going to have, for the first time ever, a purpose-built gymnastics facility.
Where's that going to be?
At Oakfield, in the old Oakfield sports hall. So it's going to have pits that won't have to move the equipment in and out.
Is it? We've heard from we did an outreach stall on Friday.
Yeah.
We heard from gymnasts saying that they were concerned that they've currently got Olympic standard equipment that they can't now use. They're not going to be able to transfer that the floor is not appropriate, that it's too small. Have those concerns been taken on board?
They've absolutely been taken on board. The equipment that we're going to be providing at Oakfield is manufactured by the exact same company It won't have the Paris logo on it. The gymnastics equipment at Fort Regent, we understand, belongs to the International Gymnastics UK Association, so it doesn't belong to the local club. I think we've asked about buying that equipment, but I don't think that was possible. And so we've agreed and signed off the design of the gymnastics facility at Oakfield with the clubs. And we've also been working with the British Gymnastics Association in terms of the layout, because they've got responsibility for dozens, if not hundreds, of gymnastics clubs around the UK, and they facilitate up to 1,000 people in a similar space.
They've told us that they're losing a third of their floor space, which is going to be difficult for floor work. Is there a way around that?
Well, the building is the building. I'm not sure if Barclay wants to come in on the design.
Yeah, when we started designing Oakfield, they currently occupied for many years a small space at Fort Regent of about 290 metres squared. So we're doubling that at Oakfield. And as the Minister said...
You said when they started they had 290, but what have they got now? What are they leaving?
They're currently using almost the entirety of the Queen's Hall.
Yeah.
So that's just not possible to replicate that amount of space. But certainly for...
But what's the implication then for the sport by not replicating that space?
I think they have a 13 metre squared, 13 by 13 floor at the moment. They'll get a 12 by 12 floor at Oakfield.
So I think the important thing is that the British Gymnastics Association have worked with us and have signed off the design of the facility we're going to be providing. They are the national experts in provision. I think what's happened is we've got a club who have grown into a space in the rotunda and have enjoyed that space. We're trying to do more in terms of viewing. So we're looking at the potential to provide viewing from the studio as a potential. I was at Oakfield only last week to see the work, and I would encourage you to go and visit Oakfield to see the quality of the provision we're going to be providing there, both in the new sports hall and in the gymnastics facility. We liaise with local clubs, we talk to national governing bodies, and the national governing body is telling us that this equipment, this design, is sufficient for up to 1,000 users a week. And I think that's significantly
So you
more.
don't believe what the local users are telling you?
No, we've listened to what the local users are telling us, and if you ask me if I would like to have a shed twice the size, I'd say great. The reality is we've also offered the gymnastics club the same rates for the next 2 years that they've been paying at Fort Regent, whilst we review the costs and the charges for sport across the board.
Can I just come back, sorry, on this gap analysis thing, because it's really bugging me that if you don't understand the level of demand right now because you don't collect the data. So my question is how therefore can you ever hope to work out how much funding sport needs? I'm struggling to find an answer to that question because it's a bit like a finger in the air.
Well, we liaise with the governing bodies locally, and nationally at times, because they can give us guidance in that. There are some sports which I'm sure could grow, but let's look at shooting. We've got a number of shooting ranges around the island which are underutilised because the amount of people participating in shooting is sadly declining at present.
But isn't this about more effective use of the resources we've got?
Well, I think what you've got to do is you can't just take a commercial view on it, because if we took a commercial view on it, we would have one bowling centre. We've got 3 bowling centres on the island. We've got 2 indoor bowling facilities. We've got Grahamville and one at Trinity. But if you took a commercial view, you'd only have 1 bowling centre. Yeah. So you have to take into account the feedback from the community, from the users, from the sports. And that's what we try to do as best as we can.
So, Minister, we weren't necessarily intending to go down this route, although it's fine, but maybe it was a question we would have asked later. Is there an issue around fragmentation in your mind of some sports clubs, in terms of if there are relatively small numbers spread out?
Well, I think in some sports there's more politics than in politics. So there are sports which are fragmented, there's no doubt about it, and where shared use would be a good thing to see. Unfortunately, people aren't keen on shared use in some sports because of history, because of relationships, whatever that may be. But I think in general, when you see organisations like the Island Games, the Commonwealth Games, the Sports Council, Jersey Sport, they do pull sports together. And, you know, they've all got to be, if you want to go to the Island Games, you've got to be part of a recognised body. So there is, you know, cycling is a sport that I've been involved in. I was chairman of the racing committee 40 years ago for a cycling club locally. There's very few races held locally currently. There's more people cycling now than ever, and there are more clubs than there's ever been. But the Cycling Association is trying to pull them together, trying to organise more competitive events. Yeah. So it's a challenge, yeah.
I mean, clearly shooting's an interesting one because there's so many different disciplines within shooting. But could you give us an example, and feel free to bring in some of your other panel. If a particular sport is making a bid for government funding, let's say it was netball, but it could be, you know, just hypothetically, and there are many different clubs within that, how would you ensure that the money is attributed differently and that you're not having to deal with multiple representations from different clubs? And netball's probably not a great example, by the way.
Well, I think what we do our best, as I said earlier, we provide a huge amount of facilities for a huge amount of people, and I don't know the amount of people that participate. I should know at our facilities each week, but it's really significant. I'm not sure if you've got that number, Barclay, have you?
It's almost impossible. I mean, on the basis that a lot of our facilities are open, it's you know, we don't count how many people have a kick.
But gyms, for example, we provide gyms. I'm really keen to get the gym at Oakfield open to the public, not during school hours. We've got a great facility there, and when we open Oakfield in October, that's the plan, is to open up that gym. We're looking to get the Langford gym for junior active members. And, you know, we want to encourage more and more people to participate. In terms of when a sport comes to us, that's also a challenge because a lot of sports provide their own facilities, sometimes with government support, sometimes without government support. You know, David was outside with his tennis rackets. We've got private clubs. We've got organisations that run tennis courts. And, you know, paddle's another example. You know, I was asked when I became minister to provide paddle courts. And I said, why would the government provide paddle courts when it's a commercial operation? And we've seen that.
But there are knock-on effects, so I understand what's happening at Les Ormes is to accommodate paddle. Paddle's taken off, but it means that the netball is going to be displaced from Les Ormes, and now that they feel as if they don't have a home for their sport.
Well, netball have had an arrangement with Les Ormes, which is a private relationship. We supported them last year with, I think it was around £15,000 towards the rent, because the rent went up. And we also supported them financially to go to a tournament they participated in. So we do try to work with the different sports. Netball, when I first became minister, were in discussions with a private operator about building their own centre, which shocked me because I knew we were building a 3-court facility at Oakfield, and they've been in discussions about the design of that. And as I said earlier, we've got a meeting with Netball next week to talk about scheduling and try and find solutions.
But do you accept, though, that there are sometimes, it's one thing to say, you know, we're not going to invest in one particular sport, paddle, but then that might have a knock-on consequence of paddle might be commercially viable without government interventions, but there are other sports which do need government support.
Well, we've seen, you know, the facility at Les Ormes provided, provided facilities for tennis at one time. It provided football facilities at another time. It's provided netball for a long time. And, you know, they're an operation which needs to ensure they had a rolling agreement with the netball. Netball were talking to another private provider, which I think most people knew about, and so they've had to make a commercial decision. And we're going to try our very best to help netball with a solution.
Can I just carry on about the fragmentation, because I think this is one of the things which it does concern me a lot about this dispersion of sports. Because if you're thinking about you're a youngster, I mean, I've got into tennis because my dad was a tennis player, and so therefore I've carried on and picked up that sport. However, if I'd been walking around, and we will bring up Fort Regent later on, but if I'd been walking around the halls and seen other sports taking place, so whether it could be at the moment it's table tennis, it could be judo or something like that. That opportunity to look at another sport which you may not have considered before ever, and actually you might be brilliant at it and you didn't know that. So by that fragmentation, surely we are actually that's to the detriment of opportunity for young people who want to maybe experiment in new sports and try out new sports. And
Well-
this is one of the beauty of having stuff under one roof. And I appreciate Oakfield does that to an extent, but it's extraordinarily done at Fort Regent. And I'm not, as I say, I'm not going to pick on
Okay,
Fort
so
Regent,
this-
but my point about that general collective nature is
So
beneficial to
this
society.
weekend, the Jersey Sports Council are going to be holding what I would describe as a sport for all day. I'm not sure if that's what it's called. We are sponsoring that because we're providing Le Canave free of charge for the day. I'm sure Jersey Sport are going to be there, and that's an opportunity for sports to demonstrate their facilities. And last year, Serena Kirsten did something very similar at Grainville, which was well attended. It was a great event. People are complaining because some sports aren't included. And all of the sports that are members of the Sports Council were invited to attend. It may be because they've got an event on themselves. It may be because they haven't got volunteers. So not all sports that are covered by the Sports Council will be represented at the Sport for All Day. But that's a practical example of the government supporting sports in general via the Sports Council by providing the facilities, additional parking at Canave School and the airport playing fields. Hopefully that will be needed. Hopefully the weather's better than this morning, where people can go along and they can have a taste, that they can talk to people involved in sport A, B and C. And we're more than happy to do those kind of things to help people. But that's an example of where sports, an organisation which represents various sports, haven't been able to get all their sports that they represent to attend the same event. On Sunday, the event moves to a nautical theme, and so they're going to be at St Albans doing sailing and different things like that. So I think I'd like to see that become an annual event, and I can remember those events taking place at Canave 40 years ago. And I really hope that becomes an annual event with partnership from the government, from Jersey Sport, the Sports Council, so that people can get a taster. Last weekend we saw hundreds of children taking part in the triathlon at Le Canave, where they swam, they ran, they cycled. What a fantastic thing for people to be able to do, to get a taste. Do they want to do all three sports? Do they enjoy cycling more than swimming, or vice versa? So there's lots of things and opportunities for people. And, you know, the youth programs that are available in Jersey today far outweigh anything we've seen in the past. Far outweigh anything we've seen in the past. You know, I enjoy watching football, and I can tell you the technical ability of young boys and girls, and particularly girls, has improved dramatically over the years. So, you know, I think we have to work on the strength and condition of younger athletes potentially. But, you know, there's some fantastic coaches available and coaching that never used to be available on the island.
Thank you. I'm going to revert to Deputy Andrews now. He's going to turn to some questions for and about Jersey Sport.
Yes, yeah, no, thank you very much, Chair. David, I just wanted to start off by asking you about whether you feel that Jersey Sport is appropriately funded, and if not, what areas would you like to see investment in the particular services that you would like to offer?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the first instance, I'm never going to say that we receive enough funding, as the Minister suggested earlier on. If you give me twice the amount of money, then I'm going to do twice the amount of things. I think it was one of the things that was highlighted in the review of sport, that there was a lack of clarity around the role of Jersey Sport. And I think, as I've described previously, Jersey Sport at that time was trying to be 100 things to 100 people.
Yeah.
And hence the reason I think that was quite clear in the review. So, you know, in the last year, it's been quite transformational. We've focused on strategic priorities. We've made some difficult decisions. And I think that, you know, as highlighted in the pack, I think we are now in a position where I believe the sports community are recognising the difference in Jersey Sport.
Yeah.
So to answer the question, I think in the first instance, it was about ensuring that we maximised the funding that we got from government.
Yeah.
And how we deliver that through our partnership agreement and our regular partnership meetings with Government of Jersey colleagues. And I think secondly, I think that it's also to highlight, I think that going right back to 2016, when at the time the sports division included the facilities and it also included sport development, the sport development moved from Government of Jersey to quite simply do things outside of government that it couldn't do when it was inside of government, particularly around that philanthropic area of ensuring that we can raise our own funds to then reinvest back into sport.
Yeah, and so you spoke about strategic priorities, and I just really wanted to ask whether you've had to make some tough decisions, potentially bringing about cuts to certain areas within Jersey sport? And if so, what areas have been impacted?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, that was a very difficult exercise that we had to undertake. As I say, it was very clear that we couldn't fulfil the remit of being 100 things to 100 people. So in the first instance, we had to look at our services, we look at how we're delivering them. We had to identify if there was potential duplication, say, in the private sector. And ultimately, that drew a number of conclusions. The first conclusion was that we pulled back from toddler play in November of last year. The reason for that is that we believed that there were other providers currently delivering that service.
Yep.
Secondly, that the programme itself wasn't delivering the impact that we would hope. And, you know, in my years of experience of sport development, I think it's really important that whatever you do, you deliver impact.
Yep.
So what we did with that particular programme, we reinvested the funding into more a community outreach programme, which you may have seen in the media in the last few weeks. We're doing significant amount of work down at St Clement's around about sort of skateboarding projects, footballing projects, and you know, that particular programme that has been funded from the toddler play funding, you will see it all through the summer. We'll be back doing things such as Friday night sport in Millennium Park.
Yep.
We'll be up at Lekennevy in the winter. So, you know, for me, it was about making sure that we are using our money effectively for maximum impact.
Yeah. And so, as Chief Executive Officer, what are the main issues that currently that you face at Jersey Sport, and what has to be done to address those issues?
I mean, the biggest challenge, obviously, is sustainability of funding. As I say, we have our partnership funding from core funding from Government of Jersey.
Yep.
We've signed in for a 3-year partnership deal, which allows us that sustainability. However, that's pretty fixed. So, you know, the ultimate challenge that we have at this moment in time is ensuring that we're sustainable as an organisation for the next 2 to 3 years, and that's something that we're currently looking at just now.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask either Minister or yourself, Mr. Kennedy, about what actions are being undertaken to ensure that there's inclusivity in sport, so perhaps greater inclusivity? We're talking about different age ranges, genders, but also nationalities. So can you talk to us first of all about if there is an issue in reaching certain groups in Jersey for certain sports, and what government or yourselves might do to address that?
Yes.
So I think in the first instance it was highlighted in the review of sport that Jersey Sport were required to develop and publish an inclusion policy that was absent at the time. That is now in place, but I think more importantly, I think that you know, policy is one thing, it's just in black and white, but ultimately it's about how that policy is brought to life. In the first instance, strategically, we developed an inclusion advisory group with a number of people who work across the charitable sector in various areas of the charities, particularly around about disability, sports. So, you know, we have people that are continually advising us on our own services. I think in terms of our own areas of inclusion, that we have recently had access to a pot of funding specifically for those young people who cannot access sport for the purposes of funding. And we know it's a continual challenge for a lot of families in this day and age that they're making some very difficult choices in terms of the activities of children. So we now have a pot of funding that families can access now, whether that be for club memberships, kits, equipment, holiday courses. So, you know, we're in a position to now finally say that Jersey Sport is a funding body, and we'll make sure that sport is inclusive.
And how do you measure the inclusion in different sports?
Well, I think that we have our own metrics, and in terms of, you would break down what inclusion actually means. So, you know, we've obviously seen netball as an example this morning. So inclusion in netball would be more around about male participation, as an example, as a very female dominated sport. Similarly, in football, you would say the opposite. So I think it's about breaking down what inclusion means for each sport.
And outside of school age, I mean, is there difficulty in reaching certain nationalities? Are there certain groups in Jersey which maybe more difficult to engage or don't necessarily feel included, welcome, should we say, in certain at certain sports?
Yeah, and again, as part of the reallocation of the toddler play into the community outreach programme, was very much taking a strategic approach to that, looking at the partners that we would need to work with. We deliver things such as an Islamic project that's been going now for 6 months, and it's a really successful project where females of out of that origin are taking part in many different activities. That was funded through the Connect Me funding. So I've got many different examples of targeted inclusion work. And as I say, it's something that we want to continue to develop, whereas things such as reducing antisocial behaviour, we're working a lot with the police just now. We've recently delivered projects down at Hardy Par and at St Brelad. So, it's an area that certainly when I came in, I was extremely passionate about to make sure that we were accessing all demographics.
I think what's also interesting is understanding the requirements on facilities. So, there's a big push to get more girls playing football, but traditionally football changing rooms are designed for men. And so there's a better understanding now of what is needed. And I think a challenge for most sports is trying to, particularly young girls, but also young boys, trying to keep them involved in sport as they evolve. I think it can be challenging, and I think there's a much greater awareness with coaches, and also I think the improved education around safeguarding has also helped from an inclusion perspective.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to move on to some specific questions that will touch partly on the decant from Fort Regent and also the more generally about current facilities for current sports. So I'll ask Deputy Ward to just lead.
So which question are we start on there?
For our purposes, it
fine.
be here.
Skipped around some of these questions. Okay, fine, cool. So, to say there's a letter you've answering questions regarding relocation of clubs and tenants from Fort Regent. You acknowledge that a number have been unsuccessful in identifying a new location to operate. What actions are being undertaken to ensure that that there are as few sports as possible don't have to cease operation as a result of the decant?
We've got dedicated resource working on the decant, and I'm delighted. I think we've got somebody in the public gallery from skating that skating is going to move from Fort Regent to Hope Valley, and the chief officer of infrastructure has written this morning to confirm that is the case, and so that's really encouraging. We meet, I think, on a fortnightly basis with the people that are still using Fort Regent. I think I was explaining to somebody in the square who said there were 40 people being evicted. There aren't 40 clubs at Fort Regent. We have unfortunately got some people who rent space from us who appear to be subletting to other people, and their lease doesn't permit that, so we're not aware of those people. We have got some people who are using areas at Fort Regent for massage, for example. I don't think that's the government's responsibility to provide space for those organisations. We've got to work our hardest with the clubs where it's volunteer-led.
The most noise seems to be coming from the martial arts sector, and they seem to think that they're basically being shoved into one facility when they actually require a series of different rooms. Yeah, what would your response to their question, their challenge?
I'll let Barclay give you some of the detail, but we have, I think only last Saturday, showed people around the facilities at Oakfield, and I reiterate the invitation to you all to go and have a look. These are purpose-built facilities of a very high standard. We are looking at whether or not some of those organisations can go back to the fort once it's available for people to go in there. But we're moving people out of tunnels into a purpose-built facility. And as I said earlier, we need to look at the school estate to see if some of those clubs would be better suited in a school.
So you made a mention there about moving some of the sports back into the fort. Is that obviously that hasn't actually been articulated particularly in the public domain? It's all been about the new vision for the fort and actually the decanting of all sport facility. So what you're now saying is, I kind of just finished. I was just going to say that you think then there would be an opportunity for some sports to actually move back into the sport into Fort Regent.
Well, a big part of Fort Regent is to have what I describe as a show court. So in the concert hall, there'll be ability to have the Jets, for example, playing their league games, but also basketball and volleyball and other sports. So that should be a very flexible space that we can utilise. We're going to have a pump track, and we're looking at another area in St Clement's for a pump track as well. But a pump track's been asked for many years on the island, and we're looking at providing some skating facilities there. We're climbing, as I mentioned earlier, is very under-resourced on the island, and we're looking at providing a purpose-built climate facility. We're looking to work with all of those organisations to develop what those designs will actually look like. And if there are rooms for some of the martial arts clubs to return to, then we would look to do that. But, you know, I think once you've been into the facility at Oakfield, you may be a little reluctant to go back to a tunnel. Barclay, do you want to explain anything about the consultation?
Yeah, we've engaged constantly with with those who wanted to engage. Some of the mixed martial arts clubs haven't. That's their own choice. And as the Minister said, we've got some incredible facilities being built up there that aren't, you know, sprung floors, natural lighting, air handling, etc. So it's a very different.
I'm just sorry. I want to come back to your point about this, saying they're not engaging with you. I would say they would feel they weren't engaged with. Do you dispute that you haven't attempted to engage with some of these sports?
No, we've reached out to all of them, and those that have engaged in the process, we've continued that process of engagement. Equally, they've all signed off all the drawings for the studios up there.
So why do you feel that there is this disconnect between their communication and what you're just telling me now?
We have made every attempt to connect with those clubs, and one or two haven't engaged in the process, and therefore, you know, we can't stall that. We need to move it forward.
Can I just ask?
Sorry, some of those clubs may not be known to us because they may be subletting from somebody who rents a space from us.
Some may be businesses as well as clubs.
Minister, the panel received a submission. In the submission, one of the martial arts clubs raised concerns that there will be 6 different martial arts clubs having to share one single room. And they specifically mentioned that with some of the martial arts, they need to use a wooden floor, whereas some of the others need to use a mat. And this is obviously going to be a huge concern to them. And I want to know whether you are aware of this. And if so, what are you going to do about it?
Well, we are aware, and that's why I said that we're also looking at the school estate, because it may be appropriate for 1 or 2 of those organisations to use a school hall, which has got a firmer floor than the provision we're providing.
And is there capacity within the infrastructure that we currently have in some of the
There's
school sites?
significant capacity in some of the school sites, significant capacity.
So Minister, I was going to ask, so essentially to follow on what I think from what David, Deputy Wall was getting at, we're hearing a lot of concern certainly from a lot of sports clubs. So it's not, if it was just one, we might, you know, not saying we would dismiss it, but it would carry less weight. We're hearing from skating, for example, that the floor surfaces are not sufficient into the new areas that they're going into. We're hearing from gymnastics that they've got smaller areas. You've partly covered that already. We've heard from the martial arts. Are they wrong? What they're saying?
I believe in part they are wrong, because we have identified Hope Valley as being suitable for skating, with the floor that is suitable for skating. Oakfield is not suitable for skating, but Hope Valley is, and we also provide skating at Lekeneve. And I believe that we've got a solution for the skaters. As I said earlier, the Chief Officer has written to the skaters this morning to confirm that.
I just want to come in on that point about saying they're wrong. You think in part they're wrong. I mean, I'm a tennis player, and I think tennis players tend to know if they've got the right surface on which they're going to play tennis. I would trust the skaters to say this is the right surface for us to skate on. I'm a bit concerned when I hear you saying they're wrong, and you have people on the ground who do this sport on a daily basis saying, no, this is what we require. I mean, how do you resolve that disconnect? Why is there that disconnect?
Well, absolutely, Oakfield is a multi-sport surface, so it's not appropriate for skating. But Barclay, can you explain about the floor at Hope Valley?
Yeah, so we have to accommodate a number of disciplines there: basketball, volleyball, netball, tennis for the school, badminton. Crikey, there must be about 8 to 10 sports, and obviously, as the Minister said, you have to have a multi-use floor for that. We can't take a single sport necessarily that is potentially a niche sport and accommodate that niche sport. Those floors simply don't exist.
Okay. So therefore, we can't accommodate skate elsewhere. From having decanted it from the fall, we're struggling to decant them into a fit for purpose facility. Is basically what you're concluding.
We're putting skating into Hope Valley, and we have
Yeah.
skating at Le Canave currently at the moment.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
But are they fit for purpose surfaces?
they are currently fit for purpose surfaces, yes.
With the,
The new facilities are obviously multi-use, so we struggle with those in each sport.
let's talk to the issue of multi-use, because is it not an issue? Obviously, when skating's going on, other things can't go on. When basketball's taking place at Le Canave, other sports can't go on. Circuit training, I think, happens at Le Canave in the main gym. There's only one main hall at Le Canave, isn't there? So, is there an issue about what sport clubs, especially for ones that need a bigger surface area, about how much exclusive use and what kind of time they get? So there's been an issue about time slots that were conveyed to us on Friday at the outreach, and there's a general concern that the slots may not be coordinated right, they may not be the right times and not the right number of hours. That's certainly what Jersey Netball was saying, for example.
So I'll repeat, we're meeting with Jersey Netball again next week to look at the scheduling, and I'm trying to get access to Oakfield earlier in the afternoon for netball. It's a 3-court facility. The school currently have a 1-court facility. So we should be able to have youngsters playing netball at the same time the school are doing an after-school club. And so we're working with colleagues in education to come to that solution. Clearly, scheduling is a challenge for any sports. And as I said, I have experience of running sports facilities. And during the day, it's a challenge to get people to use facilities. In the evening, when people aren't working, when they're not at education, then more people want to play their sport. So clearly there's timings. Some organisations do different prices to try and encourage people out of hours rather than using the peak hours. So, you know, there is a challenge to provide sports at peak hours. And we do our level best. You know, for me, it's a simple logistics challenge. And by having a centralised booking system for our whole estate, I think that would alleviate a lot of the problems.
So just in terms of capacity, I know we're talking an awful lot about why is government not providing this capacity. So the question, and we talk about paddle and a private facility for paddle. Is there any sort of thought within government which says, actually, this element can be outsourced, this could be done by the private sector? So what elements, what kind of conversations take place in that respect? Because clearly if netball, for instance, has massive demand, that suggests that there may be a commercial opportunity there, as opposed to government trying to find facilities.
Absolutely.
And I wonder how you balance those, how you work that strategy out.
I will reiterate that I'm in discussion with a number of sports about the potential for private-public partnerships. And I think we've got to encourage more of that. We've got sites which are underutilised. We've also got people who've got their own land but have challenges with planning, and we've got to try and become an enabler rather than necessarily running all the facilities for everyone, because you can't do everything for everyone. And when you find what happens in sports occasionally is there'll be divisions within a club, and then they'll have 2 clubs and they don't want to share the same facility. And, you know, what we've got to do is our best, and we do our very best each and every day, and we've got to do better. We acknowledge that. And by having a centralised booking system, I think we can make big improvements.
Can I ask about the relocation of the gym at Fort Regent to Springfield, or the capacity?
Yeah.
How do you measure, and have you measured, the impact that's had on potential users? So, for example, people who work in town who might have gone to Fort Regent for a class at lunchtime. I mean, I count myself as one of those, or to the gym. Is there a risk and any evidence that behaviours change? Maybe those that just stop doing that completely, they don't go to Springfield, it's too far away.
I'm going to pass you to Berkeley in a moment, but I'm just going to say before Berkeley answers you is that we've got a gym at Oakfield which is hugely underutilised, which we're trying to add to our active offering. And that's going to happen in October.
Why is it underutilised? Is it just not accessible? Or is it people not aware of it?
There's been issues with staffing and also with technology. But once we resolve those as part of the upgrade to Oakfield, then people who may be using Springfield and live at Five Oaks may go to Oakfield. So,
But do you accept that if you work around here, if you work in the central St Helier, it's a bit more tricky to get to Oakfield for your lunchtime, especially if you only get 1 hour, than it might have been to
so
get
won't
to
be,
Port Region.
Oakfield won't be open at lunchtime because priority will be for the school.
So that's another issue, isn't it?
Yeah, but we have got many private gyms within St Helier, and outside of St
But
Helier.
that doesn't help the active cause, does it? I mean, I think you've got a great product with active.
Yeah.
It's publicly available. It's people subscribe to it, and you don't want to be telling members of the public to go to a private gym because we've shut our one in central St Helier.
I'll let Barclay answer around the active numbers.
Yeah, the active card's performing well. The income's up. We set ourselves some targets this year of improving the income, and we're very close to hitting those. We keep a number of KPIs for the active card scheme, so we're more than happy to share those with you. I have them here, and we.
The numbers are up. But what's the 5-10 year? What do the figures look like over that period of time? Has it been going up, down, static?
COVID was a challenge, obviously, but we're slowly recovering from that piece, and it's.
Closing the gym was a challenge. What happened after 2023? Did you see a dip or an increase, or was
We saw a dip in income, definitely, yeah. And I think, as the Minister said, there's 15 plus private gyms that absorb a lot of the heat out of the gym market, as it were. So, Springfield was very well received. I know. We have a far more female-friendly environment there because some of the big weights that we had at Four Regions we didn't put back in. But yeah, as the Minister said, more than happy to show you those facilities. The classes are absolutely full there. We have a great group exercise occupancy rate here. Let me just find it, of about 76%. So our classes are pretty full, and we'd love to put more classes on. And as the Minister said, once Oakfield is staffed, we've got a fantastic little gym up there, and the intention is to open that up to active card members outside of community time.
And can I just ask on that? So when you say the classes are full, I mean, that's good in one sense. It's very not good if you're a user. And I think there may be a frustration from some active users that certain classes are just always full. So as soon as you go on the app on a certain time, you can never get into them. Is there a way around that? Is there perhaps could there be an option for maybe a premium that you can pay a small contribution more to get a fixed number of classes every year?
It's a good question. We haven't explored that. We're constantly trying to make sure that those who sign up attend, those who don't attend are asked to cancel their class. But yeah, certainly the class program is very popular, and we are constantly trying to improve it, both from a product perspective, so it's not the same thing every year. So bring in new classes, and we've got the addition of Oakfield now to potentially run some more classes there in the evenings, which is good news.
So we've got on average we've got 24% capacity, so 76% full. So there will be some classes that are fully booked, but things like spinning at Springfield, you can do that almost any time now, can't you, with the technology?
Correct. So we've got a virtual studio there, so you can go in, press a button, and do a class. But as I say, it's I think the active card product is doing well and certainly on the up, and we would like to continue to expand it.
I just want to pick up on the Chair's commentary around locations, because obviously free facilities, cost of living issues as we have today, people can't afford maybe to have that gym membership and all the rest of it. And so free facilities in the right places, certainly in terms of town and St Helier is concerned, are really, really important. So if Springfield is near capacity, the question then has to be where else is there to go for people who want to have a free facility, an indoor free facility? Are there any thoughts around that? Obviously, now that the fort is closing,
So Springfield's not a free facility.
It's an active membership. It's an active card, isn't it? You pay a contribution, though. You don't pay the full cost. You don't pay the full price of it. It's not like a private gym.
You contract with us to have a gym membership there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is in a sense.
So you do pay. You do pay something.
Correct.
But not the full amount as you would do if you were part of a private member's gym. If you
went providers charge more,
significantly more. Yeah. So maybe instead of using the word free, I should say more affordable offerings.
So that'll be part of our review in terms of what things cost us and what we charge people, but also mindful of the benefits of people using those things. So, you know, some of the classes are free for a short period of time when people are getting back on the road to health. And so there's been quite a lot of work done around that piece as well.
Okay.
We're trying to encourage people to continue exercising.
We talk about exercise referrals, so non-active members can still go. Can they still get referred to exercise through to classes? Is that what you're saying?
Exercise referral's got nothing to do with active card. Two
it.
totally
Do you
separate.
wanna
But
follow me?
can they get?
Dave will talk to
Yeah, so the Move More Referral is a Jersey Sport programme, of which we receive referrals from doctors and other relevant people who are dealing with people who have some sort of ailments or conditions that require an exercise programme.
Yes, talk us through the nuts and bolts of that. So, do people get referred to you who need exercise, like a prescription, effectively?
Yes,
from a
so
doctor?
you would go to see primarily your doctor, where you would feel as you have a condition. The doctor would decide if exercise would benefit that condition. The doctor would then refer it to us, and then we would then take on the client for a referral programme.
And who provides the facility and the guidance for the sport, if you like, for the activity?
Yeah, so we in 2024 we moved that programme up to Strive. We felt we needed a bigger facility to accommodate. That has worked really well for us, and that we are.
And how does the funding work of that? Do you pay Strive money?
Yes, so the actual programme itself is funded from our core budget from Government of Jersey. That allows us to then hire the facility of Strive. We have that all day, so it allows us to deliver the number of classes that require to meet the demands of.
Is that just for exercise referral, or is it a mixed class? Is it a class that's going on anyway, which you're enjoying?
So what would happen on exercise referral is that clients would go on a 12-week programme. After that, they would then go into a pay-as-you-go option, of which is open to other people.
So previously, that was done, if we can call it in-house, it's done through the active scheme, is that right?
Well, I don't know, it predates me.
Would
Can I?
Barclay know?
Exercise referral.
So I can answer
No,
that
we
one.
haven't delivered exercise referral.
No.
They
It's always
would,
been
they would
through
have
Jersey
used, they would have
Sport.
used the active facilities.
So that's what I
but
mean,
We
so-
wouldn't have delivered the programme.
But ultimately, active would have been getting the money, if you like, or the wooden dollars, if there were any, rather than, because at the moment we have to pay Strive, which is a private business.
Yeah, and likewise, when we transferred the programme to Jersey Sport was then paying the government for the hire of those facilities.
But Jersey Sport was getting its money from government, effectively, and then paying government back.
Yes.
What I'm saying now is that money is now lost. It's not lost, but it's going to a private business rather than going back into the states.
The programme was delivered from Communicare in St Brelard, it was Salvation Army in St Helier. There were a lot of inefficiencies in the programme. If we took the individual who delivered it, who was an employee of Jersey Sport, they would arrive at a venue half an hour beforehand, set up, deliver a class to their patients for an hour, take half an hour to break down, then take 40 minutes to drive across the island, then take half an hour to set up in another venue. The efficiencies were such that not a lot of people were getting through the programme. The programme was paused. In Jersey Sport, people couldn't get onto their 12-week programme. So you've had a hip replacement, you get referred, and now you've got a 14-week wait before you can start your 12-week referral programme. What we've done by moving it to Strive is a two-part venue. There's the public-facing gym where people pay a monthly membership, and there's the academy bit, which is used by the British and Irish Lions and high-performing teams when they come to the island once or twice a year. That is a massive area, underutilised, day in, day out. So the capacity in the GP referral programme has been increased by 93%, I believe the number is. So it's been unfrozen. It's on a bus route. There have been one or two people who said, well, it's not as convenient as Salvation Army, but actually we've increased the capacity and there is no wait list anymore. So when you look at all the things that are important to somebody coming out of an operation and being referred by a GP, we've taken those things on board, and we think that the move to that venue is not denying other venues income. Actually,
You're saying
the
it's
cost-
good value. You'll be able to tell us the
I think
amount
something
that's
like
paid to Strive.
yes, we if it's not commercially sensitive, we'll be happy to share that with you. I think you'll be blown away by the value for money on £1 per square foot, which is what you measure value for money on. And
We did a lot
very
of work before making the decision to move, and we're very pleased with the results. Very pleased.
But am I right in saying there was previously an active scheme where free passes were given to certain groups of people for to be able to use? In my recollection, I don't know if that was to do with age or to do with infirmity, but that's been stopped.
That
few
may be
years.
the case, but I don't know.
Do you
You might be
recall that?
referring to the over 80s.
I'd have to go back
I'd
to
have
that.
to-
I don't think it was over
Well,
80s, but I think there
We'll
was.
write to you.
Or you can.
Yeah, it could have even been to do with means testing and lower paid income support, that kind of thing. But long-term incapacity, I think it might have been linked to that.
Okay, I mean,
All right,
we'll
thank
take
you.
a question. Yeah.
Deputy Andrews, I think, have you got a couple of questions?
Yes, I do indeed. Thank you, Chair. Minister, I just want to go back to Fort Regent and the relocation of some of the sports organisations and clubs. Do you think there is a danger that we could see some of the sports clubs and organisations that we have known for many years disappear because there is not a suitable alternative location for them?
I hope that's not the case, but ultimately it'll be down to the operators. Some are, as Heath mentioned, some are run as clubs and some are run as businesses. So some people may make a business decision. As I said earlier, we've frozen the rates for 2 years for the move, and we've got one of the team who spends a lot of time with these people discussing alternatives. So I certainly hope that there's not a move. I'm hoping to see increased participation in these sports when people see the facilities they've got to practice in.
Okay, thank you, Minister. I noticed you use the word hope, and I just wanted to know when the Jersey Development Company launched their public consultation, was it something that you considered that if we are to see the redevelopment of Fort Regent go ahead, then there potentially could be some implications for some of the sports clubs and the organisations in our island? And were you confident that there is the infrastructure in place to house all of those organisations?
Well, I think we are the third government to make the same decision. So there's been a lot of work done previously. And, we have got, as I said earlier, lots of sport provision locally, and I hope that the existing providers continue to be providers. But if people aren't able to participate with Club A, then perhaps they'll move to Club B. It's around the participation rather than the amount of operators we've got. There are very different sports played there of a similar nature, but there's very many different martial arts. But I'm hopeful that we can find solutions with these people, as I said earlier, either at Oakfield or within our estate or within the private area. And we know that there are martial arts practiced around the island, not just at Fort Regent, and I'm sure that will continue to be the case.
Yeah. Well, speaking to one owner of a martial arts organisation, they spoke about their concerns that they might not have any alternative in place. And I just want to know, what is your response to that member of the public's concern about their martial arts club
Well, I don't know if
potentially
that's-
not having an alternative?
I don't know if that's one of the clubs that is or isn't engaging with us. So if it's one of the organisations, I think there's only one or two that aren't engaging with us, I'd encourage them to engage with us as soon as possible, because we are keen to find solutions wherever that is.
And does that mean, potentially, Minister, that you may have to be part of the process that involves work with the private sector if need be?
I'm more than happy to meet with any of these organisations, as I've repeatedly stated. And unfortunately, I wasn't available on Saturday when they did the tour of the Oakfield facility because I'd have liked to have been in attendance.
Yeah, thank you very much, Minister. Jack?
Yeah, I just wanted to progress around this idea of sporting development. I know some of the questions around the Island Games are towards the end of this, but it's really about, could you just walk me through how we deliver elite athletes? As we've been talking a lot about netball, how do we, what is the line that goes from a 5-year-old picking up a ball and throwing it around to someone becoming a Serena Guthrie in netball? How does that, is there a structured approach to that, or is that just serendipity?
Well, it really depends on the sport, and
Right.
Dave can talk to you about the performance pathway we've got. But I was contacted at the weekend by the father of a girl who has just been signed by one of the large UK football teams to play women's football, and so.
You're picking one sport which has obviously got a high.
Dave's going to talk to you about the performance pathway. So it's very different in different sports, and this person has gone out of their way to go and almost promote themselves to various clubs to try and find a pathway. In other sports, there may be a national program. So on the radio this morning, we were talking about the fantastic swimmer we've got who's hoping to go to the World Junior Championships after the Ireland Games. So it's very different for different people. But I'll ask Dave to talk about the performance pathway, please.
Yeah, so just as the Minister says, that it's very much down to individual sports in terms of what that pathway can look like. There's many factors in everyone's journey, facilities of which we've touched on already. I would also emphasise high quality coaching as a massive factor in determining the sort of
Obviously, infrastructure is a major part.
100%.
Quality of infrastructure.
Yeah, to ultimately allow an athlete to achieve their potential. Obviously, in 2024, the government invested £120,000 into the performance sports strategy, which Jersey Sport initiated. That process saw us going out to all athletes across the island for an expressions of interest. And the reason that we did that is that we felt if we were to identify athletes on our own, there was a potential that we would miss a number of athletes because sport is obviously so broad across the island. So the initial expressions of interest, we received 91 from athletes across the island. So then we obviously had a process to go through to develop a criteria in terms of what performance looked like. So we required the development of a committee, a very knowledgeable committee when it comes to sport. We had our top sports people such as Serena Kirsten, Nathan Jegu, Scott Van Breda, who came together, who were our advisors into that process. So in the end of 2024, we were able to distribute funding to 24 of those athletes. Those athletes were what we classed as podium athletes, so they were near the top of their individual sports. So people in that particular programme, such as Aaron Canavan in snooker, so Aaron did really well there not so long ago, finished second in the World Seniors. Seen Hannah Silcock excelling. So there's been a number of athletes in that programme. And then that takes us into 2025, where in our second year of that funding, we identified almost a new generation of athletes, so the more up-and-coming athletes. So again, that criteria was very clear in terms of, to get onto that programme, what each athlete would have to achieve. And that was slightly different from year one funding in that we didn't specifically put all the funding into the athletes themselves. We invested in services that would support those next generation of athletes, things such as nutrition.
Thanks for that big explanation.
Yes, yeah.
So my question then is ultimately how do you align the resource, the infrastructure, with that programme? How do you align those two together? In other words, you may have a programme which is trying to produce world-class athletes. However, if we don't have the infrastructure to deliver those world-class athletes, we can't deliver them ultimately. So how do you strategically align those two requirements?
I think the reality is when you talk about world-class athletes.
Yes,
there, the
I
reality,
mean national athletes, elite athletes.
Yeah.
Let's use the word elite. Okay.
The reality is that they will be going off island to compete, not just because of facilities, but because of levels of competition. That development and levels of competition will only take place outside of the island, clearly. So that then, a lot of the funding that we put towards that particular programme definitely enhanced that travel provision for a majority of those athletes. I then add in the additional travel grant allocation, which was as part of the proposition, which has allowed us to invest up to £300,000 in travel grants for athletes as well. So overall, we've managed to reduce that burden of our top athletes to get off island.
Sure.
Thank you. Minister, we're coming towards the end of the time allocated for our hearing. I wanted to ask, I'll ask two questions first of all, just to maybe round off the questioning that we've had about sports facilities and the great representations we've had from clubs, just for the record, I think we've had about 90 submissions so far just in the last week, really, since we've been leading up to this. So there has been public interest. Can you confirm that you are listening to all of those sports clubs who have been making representations, that you will work with sports clubs to take into account their concerns?
Absolutely. I'm more than happy to confirm I'm listening. But what I can't do is make false promises, because what we can't deliver is all of those 90 clubs or commentators' aspirations. We have to be realistic. And as I said earlier, I think that Jersey has got some great facilities on the island. We need to provide more, but we've got to make sure that the facilities we currently provide are maintained to a top standard. And, we are working on refurbishments, replacement facilities, and I look forward to being able to share that not only with yourselves but with the sporting community. There's a huge amount of work done, and the team work very hard with Jersey Sport and within the government. So yes, we are listening, but what I can't do is sit here and make false promises.
Will you undertake to at least facilitate, to make sure that what government can't provide, and of course that government does provide what it can, but it will facilitate conversations, opportunities for development in those sports?
Absolutely, and as I mentioned earlier, we've missed a massive opportunity with cricket by not supporting the cricket centre at St Martin's. It was really disappointing that members voted against that proposal, because that not only would have provided a facility for cricket, but have also reduced the pressure on other facilities. And
I think that was in the last assembly, wasn't it? So
that was in the last assembly. Yeah. So I was very pleased to support that proposal. Unfortunately, not everybody did.
I think there were questions. Sorry, I think there were questions about the process there, not necessarily about the vision. But
Only thing I was just going to say was, obviously there are Nets facilities at FB Fields at the moment which are in tatters. So isn't this another case in point where facilities are actually available, but they're just not being used effectively?
Well, I'd be shocked if the Nets at FB are in tatters, because they've just been refurbished.
I drove past them literally a week ago and a couple of weeks ago.
They're brand new.
They have been replaced, have they?
About 6 weeks ago.
Maybe my recollection is six weeks rather than 2 weeks.
They were in tatters.
They were in
Storm
tatters.
Ciarán destroyed them.
Okay.
They were repaired before
And they
the
have
season.
now been invested. Good to hear that.
Yeah, and also Nets, I think at Granville were refurbished at the same time, weren't they? Part of the same
Correct.
visit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Kennervay.
Okay. So money has been spent. Good.
This partly follows on from my last question, and perhaps that one to an extent. So we are the economic scrutiny panel ultimately, and that's the capacity in which we're having this hearing, Minister. Of course, everything that we've set up until now is also important, but could you tell us what you think the growth areas are in terms of sport, the growth opportunities? So not just in terms of, in terms of what growth there is, opportunities there are for different sports in Jersey in particular, what you might have identified, but the economic growth and the opportunities that are available if we get it right in the islands.
I think there's significant opportunity, and perhaps Heath will talk to the Shoulder Months programme that we're looking to support, not only existing events but new events. And last weekend we saw the Motoring Festival, which is a long-standing event in the calendar, brings over lots of people, often with disposable income. And we've got other events. So the marathon is an area which the marathon course is in place, the marshals are in place. We might need to provide some more toilets at the Weybridge, but we could increase the participation in the marathon significantly without a lot of additional resource and infrastructure. Heath, do you want to just briefly touch on
Certainly,
on
Minister.
that?
So I think we have talked for many years about the opportunities around sports travel and sports tourism, and we've also identified the shoulder seasons as a time of year where our hotel rooms are not full. They're bursting at the seams in July and August, but seemingly not performing to levels they could do in the 2 months either side of the peak season. So as part of a pilot this year, we've invested a small amount of money in exploring new and existing events on the island, so 13 events in total. And how can we support, as the Minister says, existing on-island events that have capacity? So if you look at the marathon, we closed the roads for 6 hours for 497 runners. What if we added a zero to that? What would that do for our economy and for our hotels and for our restaurants and what have you? You might need half a dozen more stewards and you might need a couple of dozen more portaloos, but the opportunity, you get what I'm saying. So we've identified a number of on-island events that we think are good events capable of fulfilling more in that regard, and then some new events to bring to the island. We also recognise that we want to breathe life and vitality into these shoulder months and have events that are a reason for young people to travel to the island. So functional fitness is a massive industry in the world of health and fitness, and seemingly 30-somethings don't go to nightclubs and bars anymore. They want to go to the gym and they want to perform in competitions like High Rocks. So we've been talking to those sorts of providers about whether they will bring their competitions to Jersey. To do that, they will bring 5,000 people here for a weekend, which is a nice problem to have, maybe too big a problem for us, but we're exploring the edges of those conversations and possibilities, and we've started that this year. So we're happy to write to you and give you some detail on that.
That's good to
But
hear.
we haven't stuck our head massively above the parapet because we want to be, to the Minister's point, not over-promising and under-delivering.
And
So we're supporting a number of events financially this year to grow.
I think that's exciting to hear. Minister, can I just ask about, that's one thing to bring in events as one-offs or repeat every year, but in terms of the sports provision that's already in Jersey, so if we think about netball in particular, because that may be finished with those, that's one that we've had a lot of submissions from. It seems that they have a vision for developing netball in the island, not just for local growth, but also so that they can have a centre where they can welcome in clubs to train here, potentially train also in the shoulder months to get visitors into the island, sports practitioners into the island. And of course, they'll need an inside facility to do that if it's in the shoulder months where it's raining. Is that also something that you would support, that kind of vision for? And it could, of course, apply to shooting as well. There are visions in lots of these sports, but they need a particular home where they can develop and grow. Is that something you would support?
Well, absolutely. The netball example you give would massively benefit from the new hall that we're going to build at Fort Regent because we want to put a show court there. We want it to be available to take different sports, and it's not just about the participation, but it's also about the amount of people that can watch these events. And I don't know if you've watched many Jets matches, but they're fantastic, high standard, good quality participation. The girls have gone up a league, so we've got to do everything we can to support them. We've done at Oakfield, we had agreed with Jersey Netball where the show court was going to be. Only less than a month ago, they've asked for a different court to be used as a show court. We keep moving the goalposts, which makes it very difficult for the shooters. But we have accommodated their requirements, and so you'll be able to sit and watch the Jets in Oakfield. I'm not sure which, is it court 3 or court 1? I can't remember.
Court 1.
Court 1, which is the one that is at the bottom of the hall rather than one of the ones on the side of the hall, and that's a direct response to the request from Jersey Netball.
I'm just going to ask my panel members if they've got any.
I'm not being conscious the time's up.
Minister, have you got anything, or if your panel got anything for us?
No, just, we're working hard for sport. I'm personally passionate about sport. I've got a background in sport, particularly administration. Long time since I participated. But, we cannot promise everyone everything. We've got to be realistic, and we will do our level best, and we're happy to talk to all the correspondents that you've had to your panel, and we want to do our best. And I would encourage people to go to Canave on Saturday to just see the range of sports that will be available there on the day, and be mindful that there are many other sports available on the island. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister, gentlemen, thank you for attending upon the panel today. I'm going to bring these